Wait a minute, something's happening. Oh, they're turning into flames.
No fuzz on this whatsoever. The Russians interfered in our election during the 2016 cycle. They did it with purpose, they did it with sophistication, they did it with overwhelming technical efforts, and it was an active measures campaign driven from the top of that government. There is no fuzz on that.
By blurring our faith in what is true and what is not. Russian propaganda outlets like RT and Sputnik successfully produced and peddled disinformation to American audiences in pursuit of Moscow's preferred outcome. This Russian propaganda on steroids was designed to poison the national conversation in America.
That mean little country has attacked us with a secret weapon called goof gas. Right. One poof, you're a goof.
This fake news and disinformation was then hyped by the American media echo chamber and our own social media networks to reach.
For the past several episodes, Boris Badenov has been shooting goof gas at America's leading smart Alex and whiz kid.
Potentially influence millions of America.
In a period of weeks, America's intelligence level sank 14 points, the lowest level since 3 itty fishes.
This is not innuendo or false allegations. This is not fake news.
We don't know how bad it is.
That's exactly right. And that's why we've got to keep working until we can get all of this out in the public domain. And we're not going to give up until we do. I think you're going to see all of this information come out, and we're going to question why some of this is classified.
In Washington, there was near panic.
Dr. Flegel, we must have a meeting of the nation's remaining eggheads. Will you attend and act as chairman?
A foreign adversarial power intervened in an effort to weaken our democracy and to influence the outcome for one candidate and against the other. That foreign adversary was, of course, Russia, and it acted through its intelligence agencies and upon the direct instructions of its autocratic ruler, Vladimir Putin.
Well, Natasha, we stopped those two busybodies cold. Now on to the hardest part of in this plan.
And that is?
We're going to take Washington.
Darling, that's not hard.
No?
In order to help Donald J. Trump become the 45th President of the United States. But there is a lot we don't know. Most important, we do not yet know whether the Russians had the help of U.S. citizens, including people associated with the Trump campaign. Many of the Trump's campaign personnel, including the president himself, have ties to Russia and Russian interests. This is, of course, no crime. Just prior to the convention, the Republican Party platform is changed, removing a section that supports the provision of lethal defensive weapons to Ukraine, an action that would be contrary to Russian interests. Manafort categorically denies involvement by the Trump campaign in altering the platform. But the Republican Party delegate who offered the language in support of providing defensive weapons to Ukraine states that it was removed at the insistence of the Trump campaign. Is it possible that all of these events and reports are completely unrelated and nothing more than an entirely unhappy coincidence? Yes, it is possible. We simply don't know, not yet, and we owe it to the country to find out.
You're circulating a letter among your colleagues. You want the United States right now to not only provide humanitarian aid to Ukraine, but also start providing serious weapons, right?
I do, and I think it's overdue. It's plain that Putin has little interest in the ground in Ukraine, and I think the only way to bring him to the negotiating table is to show strength, and I think that we ought to provide that assistance, that military assistance to Ukraine as soon as possible.
Tank missiles, maybe anti-aircraft missiles, stuff like that, is that right?
Anti-tank missiles, radar systems so that they can identify where the artillery is coming from that is killing so many civilians, communications equipment so that the Ukrainian forces can talk to each other without the Russians.
The creator of the Aeroscraft, the game changer in technology.
Лайк, как псы, дежурные пасы, шмона нам не пройти, еще задрали носы и кличут нас чурками, руки от них в крови кричат смерть таджикам, трусы чистой воды поклоняются деньгам, этот срам не укладывается.
U.S. military, security forces, and foreign allies must be equipped with the most advanced tools to ensure the safety and effectiveness
in their mission.
I'm sure that they will. What's disturbing to us is that experts are telling us that Russian state actors broke into the DNC, stole these emails, and other experts are now saying that the Russians are releasing these emails for the purpose of actually helping Donald Trump. I don't think it's coincidental that these emails were released on the eve of our convention here, and that's disturbing.
What evidence is there that the Russians were behind this in terms of the hacking or in terms of the timing by WikiLeaks?
Well, we need to let the experts speak on this. It's been reported on in the press that the hackers that got into the DNC are very likely to be working in coordination with Russia.
You're basically suggesting that Russians hacked into the DNC and now are releasing these files through WikiLeaks to help elect Donald Trump.
Well, this isn't my assertion. There are a number of experts that are asserting this. I think we need to get to the bottom of these facts, but that is what experts are telling us. Experts have said that it is the Russians that in fact went in and took these emails.
I think the president-elect is the only prominent America about whom I am aware that has not yet conceded that the Russians conducted a massive covert influence campaign against the United States. I think that is accepted throughout the intelligence community. That is not contentious. There are a few things on the margins about intentionality that are being debated, but the fact that the Russians did this has been the conclusion not just of the American intelligence community, but of private sector companies that have looked at the DNC computer system.
And the question...
He is the chief security officer at Crowdstrike. Crowdstrike is the firm, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, approached by the FBI, by the government, as a vendor.
Brian, we actually were called by the DNC through their counsel when they saw that there were some irregularities. They were concerned about potential breach within their environment. We came in, did our typical incident response. We deployed certain pieces of technology that we use to try to get some visibility into the extent, the depth, and breadth of this particular breach. Have attributed back to the Russian government targeting that DNC network. We know with certainty, my time in the Bureau and now at Crowdstrike, that foreign intelligence services are constantly interested in...
There's ample evidence that was known long before the election, and even in most cases long before October, about the Trump campaign in Russia.
The CIA and other U.S. intelligence agencies have concluded the Russian government was behind the email hack into the Democratic National Committee and other political organizations, but have yet to produce their evidence publicly. President-elect Trump has questioned that conclusion. Computer breach. Here to explain all of this is Dmitry Alperovitch. He's the co-founder of Crowdstrike, the company that did the investigating. We want to point out, and we said earlier, your company was the one that uncovered this in the first place. You were working for the Democratic National Committee. Are you still doing work for them?
We're protecting them going forward. The investigation is closed in terms of what happened there, but certainly we've seen that campaigns, political organizations are continue to be targeted, and they continue to hire us and use our technology to protect themselves.
I ask you that because if there's any question of a conflict of interest, how do you answer that?
Well, this report was not about the DNC. This report was about a new investigation we've uncovered about what these Russian actors were doing in eastern Ukraine in terms of locating these artillery units of the Ukrainian army and then targeting them. So what we just did is said that it looks exactly the same to the evidence we've already recovered from the DNC, linking the two together. So I think it's also important for the government to release their own evidence, and I'm encouraged that President Obama ordered this review. I hope the report that comes out will be made public so that everyone can look at it and make their own judgments. It's important for the U.S. government to come out and tell us what they know, because certainly they have access to classified intelligence and sources and methods that we are not privy to as a private security company. So I think it is important to know what happened in this most consequential hack we've ever seen.
And of course we have.
Did you ever have access to the actual hardware that was hacked? Or did you have to rely on a third party?
The only source of the Russia-hacked DNC servers allegations. Moreover, as FBI Director James Comey said twice already, his investigators were denied forensic access to the servers in favor of Crowdstrike.
We did not have access to the devices themselves. We got relevant forensic information from a private party, a high-class entity that had done the work, but we didn't get direct access.
Kellyanne Conway the other night said that they didn't like foreign governments trying to intrude in the political process, and they didn't like the intelligence agencies trying to intrude in the political process. What's your response to that?
To be so casually dismissed. With regard to being political, Jake, let me put it to you this way. John Brennan, the current director out there, John loves CIA. John's been in CIA all of his adult life. There is no earthly reason John would shove the agency he loves out into this traffic lane where they are now, unless he was compelled to do so by what they believe to be the facts. And so this is not CIA being political or being politicized.
Of talk around this that there's a deep state of people in the law enforcement and intelligence community that are trying to undermine the president. And I want to make it clear from my understanding is I don't think that's the case. There are a lot of leaks here, but like many leaks in this town, they tend to come from the White House or Congress or people who are back to brief on pieces of information. And when that comes out, that's very frustrating. But I've seen very little that looks like it's come out with the kind of detail that's coming from the professionals in the FBI or the CIA, the information that is behind this look.
Donald Trump is a great leader. All of that plays right into Putin's hands. So absolutely, I think Putin sees him as an unwitting agent.
That some counterterrorism officials believe that some of the hacks, the DNC one in particular, were done by Russian hackers. But is there actual evidence that Vladimir Putin is trying to disrupt this election?
So I have not seen the evidence, right? I'm not in the government anymore. I'm not in the intelligence community. But Putin has a long track record of interfering in the elections of the countries around Russia, in the former Soviet Union.
So you're telling me that the now elected Trump administration didn't trust John Brennan, that somehow these straight arrow guys in our intelligence services were going to now work to actively undermine? Are they now seeing them as some sort of dissident that we're going to undermine?
So you think that John Brennan's response and also just how he's comported himself, you have an issue with it?
Well, look, the former director is entitled to his own opinion. But the fact remains that there were a lot of leaks that occurred over the course of the last 60 to 90 days before this election that most people can attribute back to somewhere within either the Obama administration directly or the intelligence community. We don't know where the leaks came from.
I broke the story, and I can tell you John Brennan had nothing to do with it.
Well, but there were a lot of leaks. That came, and it's not just on the last story. I mean, this goes back for 90 days.
Potential bombshell of an apology today from the head of the CIA to the Senate Intelligence Committee for peeping into their computers and spying on Senate investigators who were looking into CIA practices. I want to bring in CNN.
Well, they're admitting to having told some false statements before. Specifically, there's this question about this investigation by the Senate into practices, interrogation practices. It turns out that despite protests by the CIA that they had not been snooping on what the Senate Intelligence Committee staffers were doing, they were, in fact.
It's the allegations of CIA hacking into Senate computers. Nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, we wouldn't do that. I mean, that's just beyond the scope of reason in terms of what we would do.
By the CIA, but also a search of the standalone and walled-off committee network drive, containing the committee's own internal work product and communications. The CIA's unauthorized search of the committee computers was followed by an allegation, which we now have seen repeated anonymously in the press. I have grave concerns that the CIA's search may well have violated the separation of powers principles embodied in the United States Constitution.
CIA Director John Brennan. He was forced to admit Thursday that the agency spied on Senate staff members. Nancy Cordes is on Capitol Hill, where Brennan denied those charges for months.
In fact, I can say that the types of operations that the U.S. has been involved in the counterterrorism realm, that nearly for the past year there hasn't been a single collateral death because of the exceptional proficiency, precision, of the capabilities that we've been able to develop. That anybody who has violated the oath of office and has violated the laws of the United States should be held to full account for those. So
no amnesty for him?
I am fully supportive of having justice served.
Subnational groups and individual hackers and regimes in Tehran and Pyongyang remain bent on pursuing nuclear weapons and intercontinental ballistic missile delivery systems rather than fulfilling their international obligations or even meeting the basic needs of their people.
When you learned of Russian efforts, did you have evidence of a connection between the Trump campaign and Russian state actors?
As I said, Mr. Gowdy, I don't do evidence. And we were uncovering information and intelligence.
One of my colleagues said there is more than circumstantial evidence of collusion between the Russians and the Trump campaign. Now, there are only two types of evidence. There's circumstantial and direct. So if it's more than circumstantial, by necessity, it has to be direct. And yet a third California Democrat said she had seen no evidence of collusion. So that's three different members of Congress from the same state using the same word, which is evidence. And that's the word that my fellow citizens understand, evidence. You and I both know what the word evidence means. And we're not getting into whether or not did evidence exist of collusion, coordination, conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russian state actors at the time you learned of 2016 efforts.
I don't know whether or not such collusion, that's your term, such collusion existed. I don't know. But I know that there was a sufficient basis of information and intelligence that required further investigation by the Bureau to determine whether or not U.S. persons were actively conspiring, colluding with Russian officials.
Do you know the basis of that information that you share with the Bureau?
And that is something that is appropriately classified.
Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, says they didn't get it from the Russians. What you're saying?
Well, he's not exactly a bastion of truth and integrity.
What evidence is there in the report that there was a collaboration between the Russians and WikiLeaks?
You know, I can't go into that evidence because that's really the heart and soul of the classified report.
Not see any smoking gun certitude evidence of collusion, but it certainly was appropriate for, given all the signs, certainly appropriate for the FBI to, and necessary for the FBI to investigate.
Give me a yes or no answer to the question, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly.
All you have right now is a circumstantial case.
Actually, no, Chuck. I can tell you that the case is more than that, and I can't go into the particulars, but there is more than circumstantial evidence now. So, again, I think...
So you have seen direct evidence of collusion?
I don't want to go into specifics, but I will say that there is evidence that is not circumstantial and is very much worthy of investigation. So,
well, what we know is that there has been an unprecedented intervention by a hostile foreign power. As Chris mentioned, we don't know exactly what is there. What we do think is that the facts should be put out there. In the absence of fact, people are making up their own facts. The intelligence community has obviously made a great deal of investigation into this, so the facts are available. What we are asking is that electors and federal officials be given the chance to understand those facts.
They won't be able to stand with this president when we unfold his connection to the Kremlin and what they were involved in, which we and I consider to be collusion. There's plenty to discover, and I believe when we get the subpoenas and we get the special counsel at work doing the real digging into whether or not there was collusion, and the other committees are, you know, trying to establish certain facts, we're going to learn a lot about the connections between this president, his allies, and the Kremlin. I think that was developed strategically with people from the Kremlin, with Putin.
You can't make an omelet without breaking eggs, Poopsie.
He does not care about them having invaded Crimea, and he does not care whether or not this egotistical maniac Putin is attempting to reunite the whole Soviet
I know we need to go
Union.
soon, but just to be clear, there has been no actual evidence yet.
No, it has not been.
Okay. I just want
no,
to
it has not.
You've had very sensitive information. So far, you've not seen any evidence of collusion. Is that right?
Well, evidence that would establish that there's collusion. There are all kinds of rumors around. There are newspaper stories, but that's not necessarily evidence.
So it is, but we'll reveal the rest of the fiendish plan next time in Hairbrain Boris.
We never got direct access to the machines themselves. The DNC in the spring of 2016 hired a firm